When I studied architecture, the belief that was really instilled in me was what comes out of a group effort is always much, much, much larger than the sum of its parts, if that makes sense. So I still believe that. My name is Hallie Ford and I make work under the name Vovo because it's easier to pronounce. I'm Vietnamese, I come from a refugee family, and I was a social worker for 15 years before entering my practice, I guess. My work is predominantly community facing and tries to address issues of different types of imbalance or oppression or inequality. And my concerns are with community resilience and specifically uplifting marginalized and outsider voices as an autistic, disabled, queer, trans person. The installations I make are community facing, they are social justice facing and care oriented. I have multiple motivations when I'm working. I think there is the immediate need for moving meditation and calming an anxious mind and processing PTSD. There's very much an aspect of space making, silence making, calm making. So there's that part of it, the compulsion to do a repetitive motion until I'm no longer, anxious. And then that's keeping in mind how that can make someone's day a little bit easier or help them see that their perspective might be shared in a loud way, in an amplified way, in a physical space. As part of Everywhere and Nowhere, a show at Elizabeth Leach Gallery, I had an artist talk, which is public facing, and what was important to me was also connect with a local homeless youth organization as a queer and trans organization, and I paid each young person to attend a mentoring workshop, and I helped them, give them perspective around being a marginalized queer and trans BIPOC person making art and kind of laying out possible options and helping them identify potential potholes in that as well. Every single show or exhibition that I've had has had a social component or a social justice component, and sometimes that's not advertised as part of the show, but it's really important to me that one, it is place specific, like what relationship does this geography have with its immediate community and how can I involve and collaborate with a local organization? And two, how do I connect this object that I enjoy making with a mode of healing that is maybe directly related to that body, to someone's body or someone's physical experience of the world. For example, at Oregon Contemporary, as part of the 2024 Oregon Artists Biennial, I had a piece about the genocide in Palestine, and what was equally important to me was that I did private closed-off care sessions, and people could choose between what type of care that they received. So that was really important to me, that I got one-on-one time. As an introvert, I got one-on-one time with people that wanted particular types of, therapy, pop therapy. In 2021, I had a show at Fuller Rosen Gallery called Things That Have to Do with Fire. And that show, I started making the works on January 6th during the insurrection in DC. And it drove me to point out some fallacies or some contradictions around the treatment of those folks that were allowed into the Capitol. But it was purposefully didactic. The show had over 300 embroideries that I made about kind of slogans and politics and the dogma that comes with extreme views on either side. I feel like that show is more of an outward facing, here's a teaching moment, but it had very little to do with me as an individual or my experience as a person. And so it's interesting to see the flip side of that, which is the Of Everywhere and Nowhere, which was extremely personal and had a lot of my perspective and experience in it. Both shows hopefully speak about the same issues, just from two different directions. In Of Everywhere and Nowhere, the 11 pieces have a relationship with each other. There's a recording of my dad singing a traditional Vietnamese song, but it's overlaid with recordings from different locations of where I've found myself, and maybe places that I specifically felt like they were a semblance of a home. But that is an audio piece that plays out to the street that welcomes people into the show. The show kind of encircles this bench, where the bench is a diagram for unsettling or being unsettled and potentially settling. There's poetry on the seat, and it's a poem that I wrote on the day after my grandma passed away. She's the reason I'm in the States in the first place, after waiting 30 years for my green card. The show's about displacement and how much of a tragedy it can be over generations and how it causes the cycles of intergenerational trauma. But it's also about, I'm spanning over 30 years of moments in that show. And it's also about the kind of little weird, quirky joys that happen while you're waiting for something that's institutionally held back from you. A lot of my work is about trying to encapsulate a particular experience of either ostracization or feeling not great from structural oppression. So I think that the conceptual piece behind the action, which is the meditative action and the healing action, the conceptual background is a drive to hold witness to perspectives that aren't often reflected in mainstream media or even dominant culture art. But I think there is like a freedom maybe, or a liberatory moment in remembering that you can expand beyond what you currently know or what you currently do. And I hope that I inspire other people to keep expanding as well. I've felt, and I don't know if this is on a societal level, but my observation is that it could be, folks are recovering from the PTSD from COVID in a visceral way, in an unconscious way, in a psychological way. And so society is kind of snapping back like a rubber band in my observations. And what I'm working through is remembering how to be social, remembering how to be in the world, because I'm still very much locked in the pattern of isolation. And, weaving is a very lonely, very solo endeavor. And I love doing it. And I've been bursting to collaborate, and I've been bursting to feel like part of something richer and bigger. And I want to go back to, more, I wouldn't say the word teaching, but just more social connection and care. It's important for me, not just as an artist, but as a person, to connect with people in a way that makes them not just feel something, but feel something that moves the needle for their survival or for their happiness, I suppose. I have so many ideas on for a large scale, community-driven, set of works, I guess I could say. I used to curate a festival, and I just miss the excitement of being in the same space with a lot of brilliant minds and then seeing what comes out of that. I think what drives me in my work, or my concept of my work, is I was lucky enough to access free contemporary art in the city that I grew up in from a really young age. And what I appreciated about that was that it was accessible to everybody without any barriers. There's that piece of it, which is why I tried to talk about populism versus elitism and accessibility versus closed doors. Right now, my practice is a repetitive, meditative motion of weaving, and that is tied to my family's history in manufacturing and tied in with my anarchist principles of controlling the means of production. So seeing people's lives basically dictated by other people's profit margins versus me being an artist and taking that back. The word community, ever since I was really young, I had I had some friction with that word internally because I knew that it implied an inside and an outside. And being someone that maybe skirted a lot of different communities and didn't quite feel like I belonged in any one or another, I think that experience made me really try really hard to include people, work really hard to invite people in that maybe I could see were hesitant or shy. And then the people that I'm drawn to work with are people with a similar approach. So folks that are looking at the edges and trying to bring in folks at the edges. But in the 10 years I've lived in the States, I would say that, and mostly in Portland that time, I would say that I really appreciate the richness of folks really trying to be inclusive here in a very genuine, authentic way. And that includes community schools, community learning, low barrier skill sharing, and access to free exhibitions and free experiences and free festivals and events. I'm really thankful that I live in a city where it's still kind of okay to think about things not in solely economic terms. And I think, again, maybe as an organizer and as an activist and an anarchist, I've always been a collectivist. I'm not an individualist. I do think about how much power whole groups have and how much voice folks have together. So I'm so appreciative of local artists like Sharita Town and Melanie Stevens and Intisar Abiyoto, who are folks that are very much invested in the collective. And I hope that I can match their generosity and labor that they put into this kind of culture locally. People feel more in a community if there's less gatekeeping or less surveillance. And I hope to continue to contribute to community building in the same way, with the same consideration and with less hoarding of power.